G'day guys, welcome to another episode of the Pumped on Property Show today. Now today I am actually pumped. We haven't been actually filming content because Sam, our videographer, has been away on an adventure in WA for a few weeks. So to be honest with you, sometimes, what do they say? Absence makes absent. Makes the heart grow fonder. But today it's me and my sister Crystal. Super excited to have you back on camera and on the potty.
It's good.
We're going to be talking about something that is an absolute passion for both of us, which is getting choices for our families sooner in our lives. Now, the way that we do that is through property. So in today's podcast, we're going to talk about three very, very, very different ideas to get from A to B, which is to use property as a vehicle to get financially free sooner. But before we get into that, how are you going?
Yeah, pretty good. It's been a busy few months, to be honest. Just working, juggling life with two kids. I don't know, trying to renovate, trying to do all the fun stuff.
Yeah,
we can. By the time this is published, it'll be announced, I guess.
Okay, that's not getting edited out, guys. What I was secretly saying to Crystal is, can we talk? But Crystal's just fallen pregnant with her third baby as well, which is super exciting.
Yeah, it's been pretty crazy. I think I'll have 3 under 3.5 by the start of next year, which I'm a little bit overwhelmed about. But that's why this sort of property stuff makes me so excited, because it gives me and my husband choices with 3 kids and those sorts of things to actually figure out a way to be financially free sooner and sort of set ourselves up for the future with our kids.
I love that. Can I ask you a question? Because when you and I both started, right, we had this very much, kid-free, basically, let's go hard on this, and this is our plan, and we're going to do this, and, get out of the way if you're going to stop us. And now it's like you have kids, and that little guy doesn't want you to leave the house, or that little girl. And so what's changed for you and Matt as your stage of life has evolved as a parent?
Yeah, definitely. I was very much the hustle and grind type of person, happy to work long hours if it meant I was getting decent money. And I think it's good we managed to sort of set ourselves up earlier on before we had kids. But now that we've got kids, I don't know, I'm just really into how can we pay off our own home sooner? How can we have less debt? How can we work less hours? I think having 3 under 3 essentially will be harder to go back to work as soon as I did with the last 2. So just trying to get ourselves in a position where we have the choice for me to take more time off if that's what we want to do. But Matt doesn't want to be working till 6, 7 o'clock at night. He's a tradie, so luckily he can kind of knock off 2:30, 3 o'clock, and we have 2 sets of hands through that nighttime routine. And I don't know, we're just getting more and more and more for us isn't as important as getting what we need and then working back to be debt-free is sort of our end goal now. And the sooner we can do that, the better. What about you?
I really feel you. Obviously, you've seen it. There was a lot going on, 5 years ago, 7 years ago. There were nights of the week where we weren't even leaving the office sometimes till between 6 o'clock and 11 o'clock at night, and getting in there super early and doing what you need to do at the start. Sometimes, if I knew what I knew now, I think I could do it a lot smarter, but you do what you do. So same thing, I just want to spend as much time, my number one value in life is time with my kids and making sure that they feel completely loved and respected and heard and become the best versions of themselves they can. And then I still, I have heaps of things that I love. I love surfing, I love soccer, I love training, I like spending time with other family members, friends, I love traveling. And I also love helping people through this business and property. So, juggling all of those things can be a lot, but in my mind, it's become really simple. It's what are the couple of big things a month that I want to focus on? And then what are the things that I can do sort of the minimum effective dose of that still maintains those things, like my health and those other things that are important?
For sure, yeah. I think it's really good to just toe the line of that balance, and the more kids you have, the more you realise that balance becomes a lot more weighted, I think, on lifestyle than finances. I guess that's from my experience, but finding a way to become financially free to be with those kids more is really important for us.
I think, you just hit something like really important to me too. Like I used to spend a lot of my mental capacity thinking about this stuff outside of work on weekends. And now it's more like if I'm thinking about property, I'm thinking about it in, do I need to buy something that will get me free in the future still? Or if I've done that, what's the next step? Well, the only next step for me is slowly paying off the debt. And it's really just like snippets. Like it's more like a project approach to financial freedom versus this constant drawn out marathon drag. And that's actually become a lot better because it's like, cool, this month we got to work on this renovation or this buy, or this year we've got to save some money. And then it's like, that's done, just, cruise again and not think about it too much until it comes up again. So this first idea you and I have been talking about since 2016, 17.
Yeah, it's been a really big approach, I think, from our business, from ourselves personally, and I think it's pretty simple when you break it down.
Yeah, so what are we talking about here really is our 2 properties and 2 granny flats, the financial freedom strategy. Realistically, there's 3 really, really simple parts to it. The hard bit is it takes 15 years.
So the overall concept with this is buying 2 properties, building granny flat on each of the properties, and over time paying down debt on the 2 properties, the 2 granny flats, and then live off the rent in 15 years' time.
Super, super simple concept, right? In theory.
In theory.
Until you've got to save the deposits and house prices are a bit more expensive, etc. But the first step is what we call accumulation, right? So that is when you save the money for the deposits and then you go buy the properties, right?
Yeah.
So the example that we're going to use today is going out there and buying 2 $600,000 homes, which you can easily do in Brisbane right now. And each of those homes would rent for about $500 a week.
Yep.
And then we go in the future and build the 2 granny flats, or immediately if you're in a position to do that. And then the granny flats that you spend $200K building actually rent for another $400 a week in most suburbs in Brisbane at the moment, which is absolutely wild.
Yeah.
With this inflation, with the 70,000 people that moved to Brizzy last year, rents have gone through the roof.
Yeah, definitely.
So in theory, you've spent $600K on the home, $200 on the granny flat. So you're in it for $800K in total. And there's levels to this. If you want to spend more on the home, you can. If you want to spend less on the home, you can too. But this is our example today. And then you're getting your $900 a week in rent from the house and the granny flat. Plus the great thing about being in Australia right now is you get these tax depreciation reports. And for me, at least in the first 5 years, you get about $5,000 a year saving at tax time as well, which is really helpful.
So you've got your house and your granny flat, the $800K debt like Ben's just gone into, and your $900 a week rent. The fastest way to get from the debt position you're in today to financial freedom in 15 years' time is by paying principal and interest on the loans on those properties, as well as putting any extra rent that you're getting from that property back into the loan. So in today's values, we're talking $800K property and $900 a week in rent. Hopefully over that 15 years time, that rent will go up incrementally as well. So there's going to be an opportunity to pay down even more each week towards that loan amount on the property.
I love that because, this second phase we call consolidation, which is the paying off debt phase. And it's not as fun as the buying phase or the building, that's for sure. I'm in it at the moment. And it's just kind of like, that's when you get to go spend time doing more of the family stuff, cut back at work because you don't need the big income as much anymore. But as you said, as you pay off principal, the debt goes down, and over time the rent hopefully will go up. And so let's say you've got the 2 houses, 2 granny flats, and right now with a 4% interest rate, you're actually getting $100 a week of passive income on 2 properties. That's $10,000 a year that you can use to pay off the debt. And over a 15-year period, that's $150,000 that you've paid off that you haven't even noticed. Other things that I do is I kick in a little bit extra per week. So if you can put in about $100 per property per week, that's cool. I know for a lot of people that's not possible. For others, more than that's possible. And then the other thing that I do is, because I get my tax depreciation report set up from my accountant and I give that to the accountant who gives it to the government for me. Basically, with each of those brand new granny flats, I get about $5,000 per year back at tax time. So that's another $10,000. So if you're getting $150,000 over 15 years of, surplus income, getting $150,000 back at tax time over 15 years, you put 10 grand a year off the properties over 15 years, there's another 150K you paid off. And then with principal and interest, you paid off 400K. But you can see very, very, very quickly how you can work this debt off if you're smart. Unfortunately, most of us Aussies, when we get that 10 grand at tax time, go and blow it on a car or a jet ski or a holiday. We want you guys to be a bit more disciplined and pretend that money doesn't even exist.
They're all really awesome ideas and quite simple. Like you said, it's almost money that doesn't exist if you treat it that way, and it automatically goes off the loan. Another thing that my husband and I do is, or we're working towards at the moment, is like a third partner property. So essentially that becomes a home that we buy for about 500-600K today. Hopefully over that 15-year period, it's doubled in value or thereabouts, and we can use the surplus money after the sale. So once we've paid off the debt on that property, tax and exit fees, use that profit to then pay down the remaining debt on the 2 houses and the 2 granny flats.
I love that. So that sort of gets us to the point where you've paid off the houses or as close to outright over the 15 years. And what I love is $900 a week in rent from the house and granny flat today, puts us at that pretty decent position, to be honest with you, like 45 grand a year of rent. If you've got 2 of them, that's $90,000 a year of rent today. But what has happened for 100 years in Australia is rents have gone up by at least 2.5% on average a year. In the last year, they actually went up by about 10%. And in 15 years' time, that $90,000 a year becomes more like $130,000. So you can take out your costs and have close to that 100 grand in the hand, which I love. So this strategy is the first idea, 2 houses, 2 granny flats. The second idea is a little bit different. Now, the overarching concept with this one is we buy 2 or 3 houses, we hold them for 15 years, and instead of paying them off and owning them outright and living off the cash flow, we actually sell them, create a huge chunk of debt, a huge chunk of hopefully not debt, a huge chunk of money.
Yep.
And then we go and find a place for that money, which might be property again, or it might be something outside of property like stocks.
Yeah, exactly. It's a really exciting concept. And just to go into the nitty gritty a little bit more, if you buy 3 properties at today's value at say $500,000 per property, you've got $1.5 million worth of property in today's market. In 15 years' time, at roughly 4.8% over that time, again, it doubles. So you've got $3 million worth of property at the end of the 15 years. With that, you then sell these properties and you've got a surplus of cash to reinvest. And I know we've got a lot of clients that have done some really interesting things with that money once they've got to the end of the 15 years.
That's right. Exactly the same as the first strategy, the 2 houses, 2 granny flats. We still do that principal and interest, a little bit extra each week, any surplus income plus any tax benefits. So it's not like you have $1.5 million worth of property and in 15 years end up with the same amount of debt. But let's say after you paid off some money over that 15 years, after you paid your taxes, you're left with $2 million. I've seen clients go and do this, or investors that I've met before go and do this, where they take that $2 million and then they use that more like FIRE community model where they whack it in the index funds, in the stock markets. They know that they've averaged sort of 7 to 9% per year for the last 50, 60 years in Australia and America, or even better than that. And what they do is they take 4% or 5% of that income out each year. So if you've got $2 million in stocks and you take 5% out a year, that's $100,000 without eating into your actual capital. So your $2 million stays. Obviously, sometimes $2 million can become $1 million in the stock market. $2 million can also, in a couple of good years, become $3 million. But they just take out that 5% of whatever they've got and they keep that base there and they live off that. I've seen some other clients, unfortunately, in the last couple of years, take it out, sell all the properties, put it in crypto, double that money in a year, and now they've lost 80% of that money now.
Yeah.
I've seen that work. I actually saw one client put over $5 million into it a few years back when he thought it was cheap. It went ballistic and now it's worth $1 million, that $5 million as well. So there's high risk with doing some of this stuff too. Seen other clients go, I just don't want to work for anyone anymore. Take that money, put it into a business that's more passive. Other people have just decided to take that $2 million later in life and just live off 60, 70 grand of it a year for the next 20 years. And that's actually sort of what our mum's planning to do now. She's got her own home. It's actually downsizing that home at the moment to a cheaper one. And then we've got her an investment. We're going to get her another one. We're going to help her like get the right investments and sell them about every 7 years. And then she'll have about 7 to 10 years each time she sells one of 50, 60 grand a year that she can live off, because she doesn't have a high income. She's not going to be able to pay off these properties in the next 15 years, and she doesn't want to work for that 15 years. So this strategy is more like suited to my mum's stage of life and her income level, which is quite low. So she can't use like wages to leverage into more debt.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to watch Mum's sort of property development over the last few years. She moved up here to the Sunshine Coast, bought a house for about $550K and sold it 4 years later for closer to $1 million after doing some work on it. She reinvested that money into another property, which again over the last couple of years has gone up in value by about $200,000. We were able to help her buy an investment property in Brisbane for about $400,000 at a good time a couple of years ago. Her intention is to sell the property she's in at the moment, downsize, use that surplus cash to go back into an investment property. And like Ben said, being in a low income position, she can only borrow a few $100,000 from the bank at a time. So having those big chunks of cash deposit each time really help her buy a quality property still, which as we've seen over the last few years with her properties, they've been going up in value enough that every time she sells, not only is she able to reinvest, she's also able to live off a couple of $100,000, which gets her through the next stage of life. And hopefully over the next 15 years, she can continue doing to that and continue burning through the cash that she makes each time.
I was talking to her the other day and she's like, Ben, I've almost spent $1 million in cash that I made on a property in the last 10 years without having to really go to work. There was a period of time where we started a business together and we sold that business and she made a chunk of cash that she's also burnt through. And so my original plan for Mum was like the 2 houses, 2 granny flats. And I'm like, you know, let's get real about where you're at, Mum. Like, you don't really want to work. You know, she manages some of my properties for me, which is super, super helpful. And that gets her enough. And then she owns an investment property outright, which gets her another $300. But she just wants to travel, enjoy her stage of life, hang out with family and friends and keep it simple. So, you know, you and I have both talked to her separately with the same idea in the last couple of weeks. And she's got to the point where she's like, I'm going to sell my unit, buy like the English style cottage dream that she's always wanted to have, because our grandmother was Dutch and her home was that traditional like
so cute.
Dutch English garden, small home, big block, grandkids everywhere. You know, so she'll do that, which would be great for her. And then, you know, she'll sell this property we bought for like $350K that's now worth, you know, $550, $600. Closer to the top of the cycle. By then, I think it'll be worth more like $800K in 4 years. And she'll be in a position where she's got, you know, the whole $800K coming back. That gives her, honestly, 10 years of choices at $80K a year, because she does like to go to Europe or to Africa once every couple of years. She's got a champagne taste on a beer budget.
Selfishly, I want her not to work either, so she can mind all my kids.
Yeah, I don't want her to work, man, if she doesn't have to. And this is why we use property, right? Like, it's leverage that she can't get from her job. But we're excited that she's got that plan. And, you know, it's really nice to just see her, how she's done it, because, you know, every property that she's ever actually bought, because she's been patient, has turned to gold, really.
That's why we love property. It just does give people choices. And this sort of second example we walked through, 3 properties, bit of patience over 15 years, doubling in value, gives you those choices, whether it's reinvested, whether it's put into a business, whether it's put into your bank account to live off for a few years.
For a couple of years.
$2 million, just a couple of years. But yeah, it really does give people choices, and patience has definitely been the main thing, but I think there's also been some really good opportunities in the market as well.
I always think about, you know, one of Lisa's cousins, he's had a bit of a hard run, and before he was having the hardest run, I remember he used to be on Centrelink. He was like a ridiculously good surfer, just wanted to live and surf down the Goldie 7 days a week, party all night, like old school sort of like 70s lifestyle. And he used to get paid his like Centrelink, and then he'd go to the casino the day that he got it, and he would go straight to the roulette table and put the whole Centrelink check every fortnight on red or black. And then he was like, if he won, he would take that money and he'd just party his ass off for 2 weeks and like eat the minimum amount of food and surf. Or if he lost it, there was also another part in the casino where he could get food stamps for $3 a day for the fortnight, and he'd just live off the food stamps. So we don't want you to do with that with the $2 million. But every time I think about like different ways that people choose to spend their money and like their risk tolerance, I think of him.
That's so funny. So this third concept is something that Ben and I haven't done or don't really do, but it is an interesting idea, and there are people out there that talk about this. So we thought we'd touch on it today. Sort of the idea of buying 2 properties and living off the equity. Massive branch just fell on the roof. So we'll go into the numbers in a little bit more detail, but let's say you've got 2 properties, both worth $800K. So you've got $1.6 million worth of property in today's values.
Yeah, and so this concept is really simple. Basically the same as before. We buy the $800,000 properties today, and then in 15 years' time, we aim to live off the equity. So $1.6 million today, 4.8% average increase in the properties in 15 years means the properties are worth 3.2 mil. Same strategy as number 1, where we slowly pay off some principal and interest, a little bit of extra money each week, any tax benefits and any surplus income. So we're eating away at the debt. And maybe by the time we get to 15 years from now, we owe $1 million, but we've got $3.2 million worth of property. Now, not only has the rent gone up during that time, so there'll be some surplus rent, but what I've seen a lot of people, particularly some of the guys in Sydney, do is they go to the bank and every couple of years they take 200 grand of that equity out and they actually live off or eat that equity. So $100,000 a year for those couple of years, and at the same time as they go to get the equity, they increase the rent across the 2 properties by $50 or $100, which covers the extra interest on that as they go up. So it ends up being a position where the property values go up over time, the equity goes up as well, but there's always this bridge, and you just move along like that and sort of live off that way. Now, heaps and heaps and heaps of people use this strategy. It's not something that I like. I personally like the idea of being debt-free in retirement, but this strategy has been used by literally hundreds of thousands of Aussies for the last 100 years in Australia.
Oh, definitely. I've got a few friends that are even doing it now that did buy their own property, say 5-10 years ago in Sydney, and with the cost of living going up, they're sort of in a position where their property's gone up massively in value and their incomes haven't maybe matched that. So they're refinancing, pulling out a couple of $100K or even $100K, and that kind of just gives them a buffer for the next few years, especially given a lot of people are in my stage of life having kids and things. Just takes that pressure off. Yes, their debt's gone up a little bit. It means their rent goes up a little bit as well to offset that, but they've just got that cash buffer in the bank, which gives them some choices. Maybe they don't have to go back to work as quickly after having kids. Maybe they can upsize their family car if that's what they need to do approaching this stage of life. Like Ben and I said, it's not something we have done or necessarily aim to do, but it definitely is an interesting concept to give you that bit of a cash buffer and leverage off your property if that's what you want to do.
You know, I really like that you pointed that out, because I was thinking the same thing. It's like, the concept of living off the equity is sort of a bit weird because no one talks about it, but in reality, we use equity to buy more property. We use equity to buy cars, caravans, boats, holidays all the time. And that's why you see these people that bought houses in Sydney for $300K 20 years ago. The property's worth $2 million, but they still owe 1.5 mil because they've been eating the equity. But we're advocating, instead of eating the equity on material stuff that you can save for, eat that equity in terms of like physically looking after your lifestyle. And there's a lot of people out there that don't want to do 5 days a week of work anymore. Like Crystal and I have certainly cut down from the 5-day work week. I'm doing 4 at the moment. You're sort of doing 2.5. 2.5. But you being the primary caregiver, 2.5 is like doing 6, I suppose. But this concept is really simple and it can be used extremely effectively. Another part of the benefit of this strategy, as you said, like if times do get tough, you can always go and grab that 50 grand as a buffer for a while. But if times get really good and you're like, hey, my kids are young and I've actually got some equity here and rents have gone up $200 a week across the 2 properties this year, then maybe I don't want to work 5 days a week before they go to school. I actually want to pull out 100 grand, go back to 3 or 4 days a week for a while, and then once they're in school, go back to your, traditional 4 or 5 day work week. But what I hope we've communicated today is there's so many different ways to do this. Like, we can buy a couple of great houses, add a couple of granny flats, own them outright in 15 years pretty easily and live off the rent.
Yep.
We can effectively buy some properties, maybe 2 or 3, sell them in 15 years and reinvest it in something that's, a little bit different, or actually just eat into the savings.
Yep.
Or we can, buy some houses and live off the equity. There's so many other ideas that we haven't talked about, like commercial stuff that provides great yields, or there's developing. Or there's understanding real estate cycles and knowing that in the first half of a cycle, for the last 10 cycles, Sydney and Melbourne have almost doubled in value in a 7-year period. And then in the second half of a cycle, Brisbane's doubled in value in the 7-year period. And all you do is be a lazy investor like me and buy something at the right time, sell it at the right time. Or you could, renovate it on the way out. There's so many things you can do.
Oh, for sure. And everyone has a slightly different approach. We really love the idea of number 1 and 2 that we've spoken about in this podcast. But my husband and I, pretty active investors, we like renovating. So that's something we touch on a lot in our own investment journey. It's kind of, if we can add some value, sell the home, make some profit, pay down some debt, or reinvest that money, that's also what we're aiming to do. There are so many approaches, but it's awesome to know that within 15 years, there are multiple options where you can be financially free, have choices, live off some income that you've made on your properties, reinvest into something you want to be doing, spend more time with your family, and it's pretty simple to do when you break it down.
I love that. One question to round it out is, what are you and Matt like, of all of these choose your own adventures in property? What was your original idea, and what's your idea now that you're going to have 3 kids in a year from now? Yeah,
definitely. So initially it was sort of buy our own home, renovate, take out some equity to reinvest, and we did do that, and we managed to then buy 2 investment properties. The idea was to live in our own home, hold 2 investment properties for 10, 15 years, but in that time, renovate, add some value. Over the last 5 years, we shortened that 10 to 15 years to about 3 to 5 years by renovating and realising we'd made some money in the short term, so let's sell.
Yeah.
And then we've reinvested the profit we've made on previous properties into other properties. We then upgraded our own home. Now that we're coming into having 3 kids, we're at the point where we're thinking we'll hold 1 quality investment, sell one of the other properties, and then use that money to pay down some debt. And then on our own home, have a pretty low debt position on our own home. And then in about 6 or 7 years, start reinvesting again. So we really do just want to enjoy this next sort of 5 to 7 years before our kids are school aged. And then in 7 years, we'll only be in our late 30s. We'll start ramping up again and buy that second and third investment property that at that point in time will hold for 10, 15 years to start paying down chunks of debt on our own home and wipe the debt on the remaining investment property.
So by the time you're 50, you'll probably own a couple of houses with granny flats or something like that outright, and you'll own your own home outright, and you'll be 50 living to 100, and the kids will be out of school, and you'll be completely financially free, being able to do what you want to do at the time that you want to do it.
Yeah, that's the plan. It's changed a few times the last few years, but I'm sure it'll change many more times over the next 10. But right now it's about reducing debt, having choices by the time we're 50 rather than having to work till we're 70.
I like that though, because the only constant in property and in life is change. And if you do get a better idea or a better partner that can help you execute a strategy sooner, then it opens up all types of opportunities. And I think it's being honest with yourself and constantly going, well, what do we really want? Not what has society told us that we want, not what our parents, what our colleagues want from us or our kids, but what do we really want, and what's going to fill our lives with joy and what's going to make us feel good now. Because sometimes life, unfortunately, is short. Like I heard this quote the other day, like it's an absolute privilege to get to old age because so many people aren't lucky enough to do that. So without absolutely loving this journey, we certainly don't advocate like fire community, sacrifice absolutely everything and bust your ass and don't go out for dinners and don't go on holidays and don't do anything that you really want to do for 10 years to live off 50 grand in 10 years, which won't be enough anyway. We advocate loving every step of the journey, doing things safely and slowly when you can, and then ultimately, like, you know, being adaptable to change and going, look, you know, the home that you're in that you thought was going to be the right one, you know, you were able to make a great profit on that, upgrade to another place when the market was down at the start of COVID. You bought that for hundreds of grand below what it was worth.
Yeah.
The changeover was almost equal, which is fucking insane to me now when I look at both of them. And you're adaptable. Yeah, you're having another kid now. Your other properties like doubled in value. So good time to get out of it before you have it. Take all the pressure off, and then, as you said, decide what's next when the right step comes up.
Yeah, for sure. It's really exciting to me that there are options and that things do change. Like, I just want to get myself in a position where I can enjoy my life, have choices, take the kids on holidays if we want to, take the kids out of school if we want to. And we know it doesn't happen overnight either. Like, we've definitely got an element of patience there, which is sort of why we've given us to the next 7 years to cruise as such, and then the following 7 years to hopefully ramp up. So really it's still a 15-year sort of end goal for us. And over that time, other exciting opportunities might come up. I don't really know what it looks like, but all I know is that the kids are the most important thing, and we also really love renovating and that sort of thing. So where we can, just choosing those properties we can add some value to over time is something that's a bit of a passion of ours, on top of the buying property, paying down debt thing.
You know, what I like, I was talking to a whole bunch of clients yesterday. What we try and do is reach out once a year to everybody and just say g'day. And a couple of them were kind of like, what property has done for me is not just help me like take a lot of the anxiety and pressure off my future self, because I have an idea of where I could be if I slowly implement these steps. But for a lot of people that like are deeper in their careers, that are doing the same thing every day, that are sort of at that like early to like middle stage of children's lives where things can become a bit repetitive and you're with your partner longer term and stuff. Property for a lot of them has become like that interesting thing where it's like, I can see how this is going to get me to where I want to be, but there's new stuff to learn, there's new stuff to implement, there's figuring out markets, finding partners, there's renovating for fun. In markets like this, like almost every client has put their rent up by $50 to $100 a week on their properties. Like, you know, just it's just fun to have something outside of work that you're working towards with your partner that you can values align on, that's like going to get you to where you want to be, which means everything you're doing today becomes more meaningful too. So regardless of where you're at, guys, and which one of these ideas resonates with you, the good thing is now you've got a few extra ideas. We wish you all the best and all the safety on your journey. If I could talk to my previous self, I'd just say be patient, enjoy the journey, don't waste heaps of energy on this stuff, like, or do, if that's what you've got to go through to get to like a place where you can just chill out. But we truly wish you all the best on your journey, and thanks so much for today, Chris. It was awesome.
Yeah, cheers. It's been fun.
Woo! That's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Getting
Have a
cool,
spin.
bro. Yeah. Oh, sweaty. So sweaty. Oh, that's good. That's so nice.
Oh.